Welcome to the Wholesaling Freedom channel, where I teach you exactly how I quit my 9-to-5 job and built a successful wholesaling business, and how you could do the same thing. If you're new here, my name is Ralph, and I quit the rat race and became a full-time real estate entrepreneur, and now my mission is to help you do the same thing. Today I'm breaking down how I got my first wholesale deal. If you're new here, you're going to learn exactly how I found this deal, which is how 80% of new wholesalers get their first deals, and you're going to learn about all the mistakes I made along the way that even almost cost me the deal, so that hopefully you don't make the same mistakes. All right, let's get into it. Alright, so I remember when I first went out driving for dollars, I had no idea what I was doing. I wore a blazer with a button-down shirt and some slacks and shoes because I thought I was going to be meeting with sellers and I was going to convince them to sell their property to me, so I wanted to look like an official businessman. And when I went driving for dollars, I didn't realize that all the properties I would be looking at would be beat-up properties, and I had a letter that I was going to leave on the door for people to be able to call me if they wanted to sell their property. And so by the end of my first time driving for dollars, I remember my shoes were all messy and dirty because I was crawling over fences and stepping on muddy lawns to leave letters. And so, number one tip, if you're going driving for dollars, do not wear nice shoes and nice clothes. You should wear comfortable clothing because you're going to be driving in and out of the car, maybe leaving post-its or letters on the door, so you want to be comfortable. Real quick, if you haven't done it already, you can go over to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com/D for D, which stands for Driving for Dollars, and you'll get my ultimate Driving for Dollars playbook completely free, which will give you all the details on how to drive for dollars, step-by-step method, do's and don'ts, best practices, tools to use, and a bunch more tips that you'll need. So get that free download and go out there and drive for dollars. All right, so I found this one property when I was driving for dollars, and I remember leaving a letter on the door, and maybe a couple days later, I got a call from a guy named John, and John told me that this was his mom's property and that he wanted to sell it. He was helping her sell it because his dad had died. The mom wanted to get rid of the property. But when I told him how I would be doing this, that I would get a contract on the property, but I would need the contract to be assignable because I would want to be able to sell it to possibly another investor, he was not okay with that. He wanted to be able to control the whole deal. So unfortunately, it was a no-go. And he told me he had another buyer that was going to buy it anyway. 99% of wholesalers do not follow up on their leads. They get a lead, somebody wants to sell, it doesn't turn into a deal right away. So what they do is they pretty much just give up. They let that lead float into the abyss and they never follow up. What I did was I followed up with this guy week after week after week after week. I wanted to make sure that if anything happened with this buyer, he would remember that I've been calling him, I've been texting him, and I should be the second in line to get this deal. So I remember following up with him one week, and he was like, you know what, the buyer's actually closing next week, but you know, I really appreciate how consistent you were with following up, and I like your style. So you know what, my cousin has a property, it's his grandfather's property, he's going to be selling it sometime soon. When he's ready to sell it, I'm going to give you a call. So same thing I did there. After John and I spoke about that, I didn't follow up every week with him, but I followed up every couple of weeks or so to find out when his cousin was ready to sell that property. And then finally, about 6-7 months later, he was ready to sell that property. He gave me a call. Now I'm going to pause here because this is actually the second deal that I had on the contract. Within the time from the first time I met this seller to the time I got a contract on his cousin's property, or his cousin's grandfather's property, I had actually found another deal through cold calling and texting. But here's the biggest mistake that I made. I found this property, I got it at a great price. It was a 3-family property. The seller was just tired of the property, ready to retire and move. He had some tenants that weren't too easy to deal with. One of them wasn't paying. So I got the property at a really great discount. And so I assigned this deal to this particular buyer, who turns out he wasn't a buyer, he was a wholesaler, and he was trying to wholesale it to one of his buyers. Now this is a common practice and a lot of people build their business this way. I don't think it's the best way to create a sustainable business, by waiting for somebody else to get a deal and then getting them to assign the deal to you and then assigning it to another buyer. But this is how he operated. Now what ended up happening with that deal is his buyer, who was supposed to close on it, kind of flaked on us and ended up not closing. The attorney for the seller canceled the deal because there was no deposit made, and this buyer never moved forward for closing, and so I ended up losing that deal. So I was devastated because I thought I was going to get paid, and then the deal exploded. So big lesson there is anybody who tells you they're a buyer, you should vet them. You should be able to ask them, where do they buy, what properties do they currently own, or what flips have they done. They should be able to send you proof of funds, which should be the same name of the company that they're going to be buying the property with. So you should check they should send you a bank deck page. It doesn't have to be the full statement that shows you all their transactions, but it should be a bank statement page that shows you the company name that they're buying the property in and how much money they have in there. They should have enough money to cover that sale straight up as cash. If they're going to be using a hard money lender, you should be able to ask them who their lender is, and if you need to, you can call the lender to verify that they were a particular buyer before. The second biggest thing to do with your buyers is make sure that you are collecting a non-refundable earnest money deposit when they sign the assignment agreement. My assignment agreement is very clear. It states it crystal clear. This assignment agreement is contingent upon the buyer submitting their earnest money deposit by 5 p.m. on the day they sign this contract. This deposit is non-refundable and it's due at signing. So this way you'll know if you have a serious buyer. If you have a buyer that does not put in their earnest money deposit right away, or they're giving you excuses as to why they can't, or they're asking you questions and they sign the assignment agreement but they have to question about this or question about that, or they want to perform inspections before they submit their deposit, 9 times out of 10 they're probably not a serious buyer, and if you don't want to lose that deal, you better move on to somebody else quickly. All right, so I lost that first deal, which actually was my second deal, but it was in between my first deal and my second deal, so don't get lost here. So basically I screwed up and I lost that first deal. By the time I got the contract with John's cousin's grandfather's property, I already knew that I had to make sure I had a serious buyer because I didn't want to lose that deal again. So I had a buyer, he was ready to go, but that buyer came to me through another wholesaler. This wholesaler now started flaking and he wasn't responding, and he was trying to sell the deal to different people. So I ended up going directly to that buyer, which is not advised, going around a wholesaler who brings you a buyer. But in this case, I was not about to lose my second chance at getting my first deal. And actually, he ended up paying me more for the property because that first wholesaler was removed. I found the property, I went to see the property, I took a bunch of pictures, I sent it out to my buyers, I got it under contract for about $180, and then I ended up selling it for like $192 to my buyers. So my first deal was about $12,000. Now, once I got it under contract, took pictures, sent it to buyers, my second step was to then now have my buyers sign an assignment agreement, send their non-refundable deposit, and then from there it went to the title office. This is where you probably have to do most of the work, because when you assign the deal to the buyer, it's not when it's over. When your property is in escrow with the title office, you have to follow up with the title officer, you have to follow up with the seller to make sure they're getting their documents in for closing, you have to follow up with your buyer to make sure that they're getting everything they need for their lender. So it's a lot of work that has to be done. Eventually, when you build a big enough business and you're doing enough deals, you want to have this be a separate role in your business, which is a transaction coordinator. And so in the beginning, you're going to be doing everything by yourself, but eventually when you have a team, you'll be able to have somebody who handles all of your closings to make sure that they keep the ball moving. All right, so finally this deal closed, and I remember when I saw the email from the title office that said that they have clear to close, and then they added somebody else to the email who was from the finance department of the title office. Basically, this is the person that sends the wires and cuts the check once the deal is closed. And then now in one check, I got $12,000. So my brain was broken. I became hooked, I became addicted, and I started working harder and harder. That's it. That's the story of how I got my first deal. So key takeaways for you guys, if you've been watching so far, I'll just summarize. First thing you should do is definitely go out there and drive for dollars. By driving for dollars, you're going to have a unique marketing list that nobody else in your market has, because no two people are going to drive the same exact route and find the same exact properties. Number two, if you have a buyer, make sure you vet them, ask them questions, ask them for references, ask them what other deals have they closed, and you can check their Facebook pages to see if they're real buyers or if they're wholesalers as well, that they're just blasting out everybody else's deals. The key is to work directly with your own buyer and vet them, make sure they're solid buyers, make sure they send you proof of funds, but most importantly, make sure that they're sending you a non-refundable earnest money deposit. In my market, the standard earnest money deposit is $10,000. So if somebody's willing to put up 10 grand non-refundable by signing a contract with you, you can be sure that they're a serious buyer. If you get that escrow letter, you know you have a serious buyer locked in. All right, guys, that's it. I just wanted to share that story real quick to inspire you. If anybody's out there driving for dollars or cold calling and you haven't gotten your first deal yet, make sure you keep following up with your leads. Make sure you keep building your buyers list so that you have strong buyers ready to go. And if you need help with driving for dollars or anything else, check out the other videos I have on my channel, or go to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com and you'll be able to see everything we have there. All right, that's it, guys. I'll see you guys on the next video.